In the picturesque village of Lepange-sur-Vologne, surrounded by the greenery of dense forests and the enchanting landscapes of the Vologne River, the life of the Villemin family seemed the epitome of comfort and stability. A small but strong family, consisting of Jean-Marie, Christine, and their son Gregory, has become a symbol of happiness for the neighbors. Despite the simplicity of their way of life, there was sincere care and love for each other in everything that concerned this family. Gregory Villemin, a hardworking and determined young man, was born in Lepange-sur-Vologne. His childhood was spent among the picturesque landscapes of the village, which formed in him a love of nature and a sense of responsibility for his family. He realized early on the need to be a reliable and stable person in order to ensure a decent life for himself and his loved ones. Christine, who was born in a nearby village, was known for her kindness and quiet charisma. Since childhood, she dreamed of a family and a cozy home where harmony would reign. When fate brought her together with Jean-Marie at a local fair, the young girl immediately noticed his determination and sincerity. A relationship quickly developed between them, and a few months later, Jean-Marie proposed. Their wedding was an event for the whole village. Residents recalled how a young couple, holding hands, exchanged promises of love and fidelity. It was the beginning of their common path, full of simple joys, hard work, and mutual support. A few years later, on August 24, 1980, a long-awaited event happened in the Villemin family. A son was born, who was named Gregory. The birth of a child became a bright moment in their lives, giving them a new meaning and purpose. Christine, who has always dreamed of being a mother, has fully devoted herself to taking care of the baby. She was happy to watch his every move, from the first attempts to crawl to the first words. Jean-Marie, who worked hard, tried to spend all his free time with his son, taught him simple truths, and showed him the beauty of the world around him. Gregory grew up an active and cheerful child. He curiously explored the environment, collected leaves, pebbles, and was happy to share his findings with his mother. His childish laughter filled the house with warmth, and no one in the village doubted that the boy was growing up in a loving and caring family. Every day at the Villemin house began with worries and joys. Jean-Marie got up early to go to work. During this period, he just received a long-awaited promotion. Christine stayed at home, doing the housework and taking care of her son. In the evenings, the family gathered for dinner, which Christine cooked with love. At the table, they shared the events of the day, discussed plans, and talked about the future. Jean-Marie told his son fairy tales, and Christine, watching them, felt like the happiest woman. On weekends, the family liked to have picnics on the banks of the Vologne River. They enjoyed simple moments, walking in the woods, fishing, and playing games. Jean-Marie taught his son the basics of nature, and Christine wrote down his first words and funny phrases in a diary to preserve these memories for life. The Villemin house has always been open to relatives and friends. Jean-Marie liked to help the neighbors, and Christine organized small parties that brought the whole big family together at one table. Their house, surrounded by a neat garden, became a place where people came for advice, support, and warmth. Gregory became a favorite of the whole village from an early age. The neighbors remember his smile and the boundless energy with which he played in the yard. He easily found a common language with other children, and adults noted how well-mannered and polite this little boy was. The Villemin seemed like an ideal family, where there was no place for conflicts and misunderstandings. Their lives were filled with simple but sincere joys that they valued the most. Villagers often admired them, calling them an example of family happiness. However, behind this harmony there were events that no one could have predicted. While outwardly the life of the Villemin family seemed idyllic, in September 1981, everything began to change. Jean-Marie Villemin began receiving anonymous calls and letters, the contents of which made him think that the family might have enemies. Jean-Marie recalled the first time he heard the caller's voice. He was a rude, confident man whose words sounded like a challenge. The anonymous person claimed to know about the personal life of the Villemin, mentioned events that could only be known to the inner circle. He called Jean-Marie a little boss, alluding to his elevated position at the factory, and said he had to pay for his sins. At first, Jean-Marie tried to ignore the threats, not giving them serious importance. However, soon the calls and emails became more frequent and persistent. The anonymous person claimed that he was going to avenge the alleged insult. Although Jean-Marie could not understand what was being discussed, he began to suspect that the anonymous person might be related to their relatives, or be them, since he knew too much about the family. The situation worsened when calls began to arrive, not only to Jean-Marie but also to other family members. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and sisters began to report strange, threatening calls. The anonymous person openly said that he was watching them and even mentioned the events that took place in their homes. Gradually, the relatives began to avoid discussing this topic so as not to provoke the caller, but the atmosphere inside the family became more and more tense. The letters that came to Jean-Marie's address were written in large block letters, which made it difficult to identify the author. One of them, dated March 1983, contained particularly disturbing threats. "Villemin family, I will kill you. If you don't comply, I will carry out the threat I made to the boss against him and his little family. The choice is yours, life or death." These words sounded like an ultimatum. However, instead of scaring Jean-Marie, they only angered him. He decided that he would not allow an anonymous person to control his life and continued to behave unshakably. Anonymous did not stop at verbal threats. He began to move on to more personal and scary statements. He once told Jean-Marie not to let his son Gregory spend much time outside. Otherwise, one day you'll find him dead down there. This was the first direct mention of Gregory, which seriously scared the parents. "If you lay a finger on my son, I will find you and kill you." Jean-Marie recalled his reaction to this threat. For the first time since the anonymous harassment, he openly showed aggression. However, this did not stop the caller. In subsequent calls, he began to threaten Christine, claiming that he was ready to hurt her and humiliate her. Jean-Marie and Christine tried to remain calm despite their growing anxiety. Christine stopped leaving the house to protect herself and her son. Gregory was now playing only in the yard, and his parents were constantly watching him. Soon, the threats stopped as suddenly as they had begun. The last call came in mid-1983, after which the anonymous person fell silent for a year and a half. This lull allowed the family to relax a little. They began to think that Anonymous was just tired of his game or had found another goal. But the anxiety still remained. No one knew who was behind these threats. Despite the apparent lull, the period of threats left a mark on the Villemin family. Jean-Marie became more withdrawn, trying to hide his emotions and not show fear of the anonymous person. Christine became more careful and rarely left the house. Even little Gregory began to feel that something was wrong, although his parents tried not to talk to him about it. The family continued to live their lives, but the invisible shadow left by anonymous threats hung over them. October 16th, 1984 began for the Villemin family like any other autumn day. In the cozy village of Lepange-sur-Vologne, surrounded by green forests and the calm waters of the Vologne River, life flowed steadily. Jean-Marie went to work as usual. Christine stayed at home to do her daily chores, and their 4-year-old son Gregory enthusiastically went out to play in the yard. No one suspected that this day would change their lives forever. The morning in the family began calmly. Christine, like a caring mother, cooked breakfast for her son. Gregory, full of energy, happily sat down at the table and chatted about his childhood dreams. Jean-Marie drank his coffee quickly and went to work. He said goodbye to his wife and son, promising to return early in the evening to spend time with his family. Christine had planned a normal day, a little cleaning, cooking lunch, and waiting for her husband to return. And Gregory, as always, asked to play outside. Christine, who was used to a quiet rural environment, saw no reason to worry. She sternly warned her son not to stray far from home, to which Gregory nodded with a smile. His toys, a small truck and a rubber ball brace, were his companions in outdoor games. Gregory was playing near the house. The neighbors who were passing by greeted the boy, and he happily waved to them. His ringing laughter resounded all over the street, giving even more warmth to this autumn day. Christine looked out the window from time to time, checking that her son was okay. By noon, everything was still calm. Gregory was playing with rocks, building a makeshift castle. Christine, busy cleaning, watched him through the window. She rejoiced at how happy and carefree her son was. She did not know that soon this idyllic moment would turn into a tragedy. Around 5 o'clock in the evening, Christine decided to call Gregory home. She looked out the window, but the boy was nowhere to be found. His toys were on the ground, but Gregory himself was not in sight. She thought he might have gone to the neighbors or walked around the corner. However, after going around the yard and the street, Christine did not find her son. The anxiety began to grow. She started calling out to him in a loud voice, hoping that he would respond, but there was only silence in response. In a panic, Christine went to the nearest neighbors to find out if they had seen her boy. No one saw Gregory after lunch. Realizing that the situation was getting out of control, she grabbed the phone and called Jean-Marie, who was at work. When Jean-Marie answered the phone, he immediately felt that something was wrong. Christine was in tears and begged him to come back. He immediately left his business and hurried home, praying that this was a misunderstanding. However, his heart was clenched with bad forebodings. When he got home, he saw his wife standing on the doorstep with her face in her hands. She just kept repeating, "He's nowhere to be found." Jean-Marie quickly took control of the situation. He called the police, reported his son missing, and began organizing searches with the help of neighbors. By this point, more than an hour had passed since Gregory disappeared. At 5:30 p.m., the phone rang. On the other end of the line was Michel Villemin, Gregory's uncle. His voice sounded scared and confused. He reported, "I just got a call. They said they took Gregory and threw him into the Vologne River." These words sounded like a bolt from the blue. Christine almost fainted, and Jean-Marie slammed down the phone in a rage. He realized that the anonymous caller's threats had become a reality. The police immediately began a search. Additional forces were called in, including rescuers and dog handlers. Local residents, having heard about the incident, joined the search. The surroundings of the village were thoroughly combed. Forests, abandoned buildings, riverbanks. Jean-Marie personally participated in the search, leading groups of volunteers. He knew the area like the back of his hand and tried to use this knowledge to figure out where his son might have been taken. Christine stayed at home, restless. She prayed that it would turn out to be a mistake or a bad joke. By 9 o'clock in the evening, it became known about the terrible find. 7 kilometers from the Villemin house, near the village of Docel, rescuers found the boy's body. He was tied up with a rope and a woolen hat was pulled over his face. The body was in the water, but there were no signs of a struggle or injuries. The boy looked serene, as if he had just fallen asleep. Jean-Marie arrived at the scene, but he was not allowed to see the body. One of the policemen just nodded, confirming his worst fears. Jean-Marie fell to his knees, unable to hold back his sobs. His world collapsed. The next day, the tragedy took an even darker turn. Villemin's family received a letter addressed to Jean-Marie's. "I hope you die of grief, boss. Your money will not return your son to you. This is my revenge." These lines only increased the pain and suffering of the family. It was clear that Gregory's murder was not an accident, but a carefully planned crime. The anonymous author, who had been harassing the family with threats and letters, finally took action. The tragedy shocked the whole village. The residents of Lepange-sur-Vologne were horrified that such a thing could happen in their quiet corner. People began to fear for their children and lock their houses, which they had never done before. The police assured the family and residents that they would make every effort to find the culprit. A large-scale investigation was launched, which was supposed to answer the questions of who was behind this terrible crime and what could be its motive. The police had to unravel a knot of mysteries in which anonymous threats, family disagreements, and lack of evidence were intertwined. The crime scene was carefully checked for possible evidence. However, the search turned out to be difficult. The moist soil and the proximity of the river made it difficult to collect prints and other material evidence. The main evidence was the ropes that bound Gregory and the hat. The police suggested that these items could give clues about the identity of the killer. Later, the examination showed that the ropes were ordinary and could be purchased at any hardware store in the region. The header also did not provide important information. DNA analysis on its surface, carried out several decades later, was unable to identify foreign genetic material. This made things even more complicated. One of the main leads for the investigation were letters and calls that Villemin's family had been receiving for several years. These threats, aimed mainly at Jean-Marie, spoke of envy, hatred, and the promise of revenge. The threats seemed personal. The author knew details from the family's life that could only be known to loved ones. One of the letters received the day after the discovery of Gregory's body turned out to be especially disturbing. It said, "I hope you die of grief, boss. Your money will not return your son to you. This is my revenge." This hate-filled text confirmed the connection between the calls and the murder. The police began analyzing the handwriting on the letters, comparing it with the handwriting of people associated with the Villemin family. This was the beginning of a series of suspicions that would be directed at Jean-Marie's inner circle. Immediately after the tragedy, the first witnesses appeared. Two people reported to police that they had seen a dark-haired man near the crime scene. They described his appearance, and these descriptions made it possible to make a sketch. However, the problem was that many residents of the region fit this description. Jean-Marie's cousins soon attracted the attention of the police. One of them, Bernard Laroche, matched the descriptions of witnesses and came to the attention of investigators. Suspicions were heightened when the police found out that Laroche, as is known, often communicated with Michel Villemin, the man to whom an anonymous call informed about Gregory's death. In parallel with the interrogations of witnesses, experts began analyzing the handwriting of anonymous letters. As a result, it became obvious that Laroche's signature bore a resemblance to the handwriting on the letters. This fact became the basis for the first serious suspicions against Bernard Laroche. Laroche claimed that he had nothing to do with the letters and the murder. However, on the day of the tragedy, he could not provide an alibi for the period of time that coincided with the disappearance of the boy. This raised even more questions. The key point of the investigation was the statement of Muriel Boll, Laroche's 15-year-old niece. The girl told police that on the day Gregory disappeared, her uncle picked her up from school. They drove several kilometers to the house where Laroche allegedly went out and returned with a little boy. Later, they went to the river, where Bernard got out of the car again, and when he returned, the boy was no longer with him. This statement was a breakthrough in the case. Based on Muriel's words, the police arrested Bernard Laroche. However, Boll soon changed her testimony, saying that the police forced her to give false testimony. As a result, Laroche was released from custody. After Laroche's release, the police turned their attention to Gregory's mother, Christine. Handwriting analysis on the letters has once again become a key piece of evidence. Experts said that Christine's handwriting could match the handwriting of an anonymous author. This statement caused a shock in society, as no one could imagine that a mother could be involved in the murder of her child. In addition, 4 witnesses claimed to have seen Christine at the post office on the day of the murder. These statements, as well as the discovery of a rope identical to the one used to bind Gregory in the Villemin house, strengthened suspicions. In July 1985, Christine was arrested. She denied all the charges and even went on a hunger strike in protest. Her lawyers insisted that the evidence against her was circumstantial and inconclusive. A few weeks later, she was released from custody, but the arrest caused serious damage to her health and reputation. In the following years, the investigation was repeatedly resumed. The police used modern technology to check the evidence, including DNA analysis. In 2000, the stamp from an anonymous letter was examined, but the results were inconclusive. A similar fate awaited the examination of Gregory's ropes and clothes, conducted in 2008 and 2013. Each new attempt gave hope, but it was quickly replaced by disappointment. In 2017, the case received a new impetus due to the introduction of software for analyzing old interviews. The system revealed inconsistencies in the readings. On June 14th, 32 years later, the police detained new suspects. They became Marcel and Jacqueline Jacob, the uncle and aunt of the boy's father. However, the couple refused to testify, using the right to silence. According to investigators, the kidnapping of Gregory was organized by Bernard Laroche and his relative Muriel Boll. They allegedly delivered the child to Marcel Jacob, who committed the murder motivated by envy of his nephew. This accusation has stirred up the public again. In August 2017, Marcel and Jacqueline Jacob, as well as Muriel Boll, were released on their own recognizance, but their status as suspects in the case remained unchanged. In addition, Jeanette Villemin, the widow of Michel Villemin, who at one time reported a call from an anonymous person on the day of the murder, was under investigation. The investigation into Gregory's case continued despite the lack of direct physical evidence. Based on the testimony gathered over the years of the investigation, the police, using the ANACRIM modeling system, were able to restore the chronology of events and identify new inconsistencies. However, in July 2017, a tragic incident occurred that deeply shocked everyone who followed the case. Jean-Michel Lambert, the first investigator in the Gregory case, was found dead at his home. He has reportedly decided to pass away. In his farewell note, Lambert expressed disappointment with the current course of the investigation, noting that computer models had taken a central role in it. He also confirmed his conviction of the innocence of Bernard Laroche and Muriel Boll, saying that he no longer had the strength to continue the fight. The Gregory Villemin case has become one of the most mysterious and resonant tragedies in France. Despite decades of investigation, numerous attempts to identify the culprit, and the tireless work of investigators, the killer has not been found. This unsolved story has become a symbol of injustice, uncertainty, and deep pain that does not leave the Villemin family. For Jean-Marie and Christine Villemin, the tragedy was a disaster that destroyed their lives. The loss of their son was not only a personal loss for them, but also the beginning of endless suspicions and accusations. When Christine became the object of police suspicion, her life turned into a series of interrogations, arrests, and a struggle for her innocence. Even after her release, many continued to doubt her honesty, and public opinion often turned violent. Jean-Marie, who was initially determined and ready to fight for the truth, gradually lost faith in justice. His despair reached such an extent that he took up arms himself and shot his cousin Bernard Laroche, whom he considered guilty. This act not only destroyed his reputation, but also led to imprisonment, adding even more suffering to his life. Villemin's family has never been able to recover from the loss. Their house in Lepange-sur-Vologne, which was once a symbol of comfort and happiness, has become a reminder of a nightmarish night that changed everything. Relatives and friends noted that Jean-Marie and Christine had withdrawn into themselves, trying to avoid unnecessary communication with the outside world. They continued to struggle with the pain, tormented by a question that no one could answer. Who took their son's life and why? The Gregory Villemin case caused a huge resonance in French society. For the police and investigative agencies, this case has become a lesson showing the importance of professionalism, compliance with procedures, and the inadmissibility of hasty conclusions. Particular attention was drawn to the actions of the police, including pressure on witnesses and the use of contradictory interrogation methods. Muriel Boll's testimony, which became key, was later invalidated due to the fact that she was interrogated without her parents and a lawyer. This circumstance raised questions about the observance of the rights of minors during the investigation. Public discussion of the role of mass media has become no less significant. The reports, rumors, and assumptions spread by journalists have increased the pressure on Villemin's family and other suspects. Many noted that the reputation of some family members was destroyed without sufficient reason, which only made their lives more difficult. Despite the introduction of new technologies, including DNA analysis and interview analysis software, the case has not progressed. Investigations of Gregory's ropes, letters, and clothes have not yielded results, This has become evidence of the limitations of even the most modern methods, if the evidence is not collected carefully enough. Gregory's case also revealed a number of bureaucratic and systemic problems of French justice. The change of judges, conflicts between the police and the prosecutor's office, as well as pressure from the media, made it difficult for the investigation to work. The reopening of the case in 2017 gave hope, but quickly turned to disappointment when suspects such as Marcel and Jacqueline Jacob refused to testify. Today, decades later, the case remains unsolved, and questions remain unanswered. For the Villemin family, this is not just a tragedy of the past, but also an enduring pain that haunts them every day. The society, shocked by the brutality of the crime, has not received a final point that would leave a sense of justice. The Gregory Villemin case remains one of the most difficult and tragic examples of how secrecy and injustice can drag on for decades, leaving deep wounds in the hearts of the family, society, and the justice system.